Anne, as editor of Journal of Adolescence, what do you think most marks the journal out from others in the field?
I think the really unusual thing about the journal, particularly within the adolescent stable, is that it is owned by practitioners. It's owned by the Association for Professionals in Services to Adolescents. And that really keeps our eye on the ball of making sure that at some level our research is going to be useful. That may not be directly to practice immediately, but it does mean that in some way it's going to contribute to a body of knowledge that is about evidence-based practice, and it's about the lives of adolescents out there. It's not just an intellectual exercise.
Great. The journal celebrated 30 years in 2009. Looking back at early issues, what changes are you most struck by?
It's actually great fun looking back at the early issues. I have a complete set in my office at home, and it's really interesting to go back to the first issue. It was very focused on practice at the beginning. It also contained personal stories of people working with adolescents or individual cases. It was a much more idiosyncratic collection of material, I think, than it is now. And I think possibly in some respects less academic. It was less international. We have a much broader international perspective now, both with respect to the submissions but also with respect to our readership. You know, it's really grown up in many ways, I think. There were things like line drawings in the first issue, pictures, for some reason, of a woman in a wedding dress is what sticks in my mind. We certainly don't have material like that now. But in other respects, the pieces that we receive now are perhaps more robust, more powerful, and with a wider hit. So it's really changed a lot. We want to remain true to our original roots, so I wouldn't want to see it leave those early stages completely, but I do think it has evolved.
And what changes have you experienced in the role of editor during your 10 years in the position?
I have experienced the most enormous changes over the last 10 years. When I began, I wrote to the reviewers by hand. I put the letters in the post at my local post box. Now, of course, we have this fantastic electronic system, which is part of the Elsevier electronic system, which manages 1,700 journals, so it's an extremely powerful piece of software, and that manages every aspect of the process for us. It makes it a completely different beast. So probably the technological advances are the most notable, but of course the development in the field is completely different. There is now truly a field of adolescence in a way that there probably wasn't, certainly when the journal began, and less so even when I began, in that there's just an enormous number of people doing relevant and interesting research. So our submissions have increased exponentially, as has the readership over that period.
As editor, what do you most look for in an article for the Journal of Adolescence?
We talk about this frequently in our editorial team meetings, and I think we share a vision, and actually I think it's shared by editors of other journals in adolescence and probably other journals full stop. I think the first thing you're looking for is something that's interesting, and you can tell straight away whether this is going to catch your attention. It's like walking into a house that you're about to move into or something. Straight away you get a good feeling about something, and it is about things that make us think differently. It's about things that give me knowledge that I didn't know before, make me think differently about a perspective of development. I think we look for things that challenge the way things are done. I mean, it's also useful to get the replications and to get the small step changes in the knowledge that we have. But it's got to be something that people are going to like reading, otherwise people will not read it. It's less important in some respects to us how technologically or methodologically or statistically sophisticated it is. I think as long as people are honest about what they've done and describe the limitations and are clear about how generalizable the results are, to whom we can make generalizations, I think as long as that is obvious and clear in the article, that's not necessarily a drawback if things are not perfect.
And finally, how would you like to see the journal developing in the future?
The journal clearly will develop, the field will develop, the range of topics that we deal with will probably continue to expand. I think that what we would like to do is to include more things that create theoretical advances. I'd like to see more review papers. As I say, I'd like to see things that challenge our thinking. I think also we are going to get more and more international, and we're going to try and think of ways of drawing in communities where perhaps there isn't such a strong culture of research, and there are a lot of descriptive studies, I think, from adolescent communities in developing countries and so on that we'll see more of. We have to be a bit careful about how to balance that with other material in the journal. There are a lot of challenges always about how to balance things. So, but I do think the international dimension will be one development. We will continue to develop our series of special issues. They're a very useful way for us to pull together topics and create a sort of step change, I think, in how we think about things. So we'll be looking to do some more of those. And as always, we view the journal as something that contains material that comes from the very highest levels of the community, the most senior researchers, but is also a capacity developing instrument for people who are just starting out. And so I'd want to see us develop ways of continuing to expand that part of the journal's work.